All right, welcome to the RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast. My name is Justin, and I am an addict. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to the RICO 12 Speaker Meeting. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all faiths, places, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom meeting each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. In order to ask questions, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window if you're here live. If you're hearing this podcast recorded and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, or if you would like to be a guest speaker in a future meeting, please go to www.rico12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations or to submit to become a guest speaker. RICO 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping it that way. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of the Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to rico12.com/support, where you can click the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting or in the show notes. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 35. Last week's meeting was with Jed A., and he spoke on attachment ruptures and healing those. It was a very informative meeting. If you missed it or any other meetings that we have done, you can listen to them in podcast form by searching for RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast on virtually any podcast platform that you use. Or you can go to the RICO 12 website and find it under the link podcast. If you find value in this service, please take a moment to go to the podcast platform of your choosing and leave a rating and review. It really does help us work our 12th step by carrying the message of recovery to more addicts who suffer. Now, one more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Rory O. And his topic will be surrender, a therapeutic practice. Now, here's a little background on Rory, our guest speaker today, and this is basically in his own words. He says, I got sober in 2001. My first meeting was in the year 2000 at age 20. I'm still active in AA in Northern Ireland. I will be 20 years sober on May 10th, 2021. Surrender and personal transformation is linked to the spirit inherent in the principle of recovery I try to live by. I know I can admit defeat, but still haven't surrendered. Hence, the need for a spiritual awakening. If I don't surrender, I'm dead. Rory, the floor is yours. We're excited to hear from you.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. And it just shows you the gods are God of surprises, because no way in 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago would I ever thought that I'd been sitting here sharing about recovery today, which shows you that, that God's very creative in what he wants to do with us. I think the big book calls the spearheads of God's ever-functioning creation, so anything's possible with recovery. I suppose you said there, I got sober in 2001, which it seems like a very long time ago now. But the reason I choose that topic, surrender versus defeat, is because you can see it sometimes when we go to meetings. We can see the dry drunk syndrome, where people can get sober and they get stuck at a certain step, and you're coming back to meetings year after year after year, and they still seem to be talking and thinking and behaving the same way over the years. There seems to be no internal change in their thinking and their spirit and their behavior. And I call that where you can admit defeat, certainly, but you still haven't taken the whole 12-step process. You still haven't fully surrendered, So what is AA for me? What does it really tell me? And really what it's telling me, it's an education. It's an education of the heart. So AA really is an education to this introduction to total reality. AA education, its introduction to total reality. If we in recovery do not believe in our own heart, we cannot challenge the heart of others. Wilson wrote in his own personal story in the big book, here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. So he knew in that discussion, in that kitchen reality, that something had changed in this other man talking to him, and it was on his own heart, and where was his freedom coming from? Where was his freedom coming from that was encountered by Bill Wilson with this man who's talking to you in the kitchen, and I'm reading the literature, how this came about. So how am I looking at everything? Just in the light of the limits I see are based on the promises that exist when I read it in the big book. And what I realised, from my very first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous was A, I needed help, and B, I needed direction in my life. Because there was a certain nihilism to my drinking. There was a nothingness there. Every time I drank, I seemed to slip down back to complete nothingness. I believed in nothing. I had no significant meaning in my life. So it was a king alcohol in this mad realm led me into this complete nihilism, a sense of nothingness. So when I said I needed a hand, because I realised that this mystery, this relationship with the mystery, was just God making me become aware of things that I didn't see before. And when I started reading the big book, I started to see and hear things and understand things by myself I could not see or understand. Not on my own, on it all alone. Started drinking when I was 11 years old, and I stopped drinking when I was 21. And it was a progressive disease. It progressively got worse. Not only did it progressively get worse, but the thinking and the behaviour with my drinking progressively got worse as well. I became more and more violent. And I swung between homicide or suicide many, many times in my drinking days. Many times. Because I had absolutely no power about when I took that first drink, where I was going to end up, or what I was going to do. I could not guarantee me thinking. I think we hear quite often in AA, I've become dangerously antisocial. I couldn't be a normal company when I was drinking. So that was the background, in terms of me drinking. It got progressively worse. My friends that I drank with, when I reached age 17, by this stage I'd have been 6 years drinking alcohol. They had stopped calling on to my home to go out drinking and to go out to parties and other things because they'd had enough of me at 17, and I searched out then for the low bottom drunk, as you talk about in the book, because I'm the only people that could have tolerated my behaviour and my thinking, And then on the last night of my drinking, I believe there was a psychic change. Something happened at that point. That nihilism that I talked about, that sense of nothingness, was overcome for brief moments, very, very brief moments, which I can only describe as the grace of God. That turned that nihilism inside out for the first time in my life in 15 years, when I could become conscious of the fact and become aware of myself when I was about 5 years old. So that nihilism was no longer dominating my whole life for them brief moments when I asked God to help me in the last thing I was drinking. So that sense of surrender that I'm talking about leads to a path. That path, which began the last time I was drinking, it began a journey that goes increasingly deeper as time goes on. For me, surrender isn't an intellectual problem, but a matter of experience. It's a matter of experience. I don't understand, I don't comprehend, because I don't live yet at that level when I first got sober. But I begin to understand it a wee bit more now. What am I missing? In my recovery, it has to be about the mystery of God, which I always would have seen very, very distant and very abstract in my drinking days. And from the likes of me, has chosen to come closer through the method called the 12 steps that allows me to get better and more easily understand what he wants to say to me. That is by helping me live as an experience what we sometimes feel is far away. The principle of surrender, when I practice it, lets me understand that a new human reality is close to me. when I see the method outlined in AA literature, really, it is one that corresponds to my heart. It convinces me, it educates me, and is very, very creative. And that strikes me in some way. An encounter makes possible what you wish to come true. And I want the positivity of everything. You know, the positivity of everything is found when you start beginning on this 12-step process of recovery. You know, first step, surrender, stop fighting. And what is it you're fighting? You're fighting your fears. You're fighting the fact that you're an alcoholic. You're fighting the fact that your life's unmanageable. You're fighting the fact that you can't change your past. You're fighting the fact that you've been hurt, and that you've hurt others. And you're powerless to change it. And the only thing that saves your sanity in those moments is coming to believe in a power greater than yourself that can restore that sanity, that can restore me out of that nihilism, that sense of nothingness that I felt my whole life prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. And step three, we make a decision. And what a grace we have received. I can't go a day without being overwhelmed with gratitude that because of step three, that I can surrender. And what do I mean by that? Well, with step three, it says it very, very well. It says, bold with me. So what are we bolding? What is it? What sense of thing? What is it you're looking to bold? Is it your bank account? Is it a new relationship? Where's the instinctual drive? What is it you're looking for? And really what it says is I'm able to bold a new reality. Bold with me, bold a new reality. What is this new reality that it talks about? It leads me to a deeper awareness of freedom. Bold me with that principle of surrender, that I can keep coming back to it. So I'm not creating the same harms and hurts to myself and the other human beings today. So it gives me that freedom to change. And that produces a personality change. It produces a psychic change in the individual, that they're willing to go through with this. You know, and our aspect of that surrender is taking stock and honestly looking at myself. Rigorous honesty, something I could never do this by myself. To be rigorous honest with another human being, never by myself, it would have been absolutely, the obstacles was unsurmountable. You know, but as I said, the surrender thing wasn't an intellectual process, it was an experience. And when I wrote down, because resentment kills more alcoholics and addicts than anything else. So this resentment process, so what I understood about resentment is when I got deeper on the human recovery, instead of writing I am resentful at, how it affects me, where am I at fault, I can put down I am dependent on, how does this dependence affect me, and where am I at fault for the dependence. So when I'm disturbed today, I know it's because I'm dependent, and my dependence should be on a higher power to free me from that disturbance. So I gotta let people think, act, and speak whatever way they want, because the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, the first traditions, rest in unity. The individual must unify within themselves before they can commit to another human being. And that's an ongoing process. So when I realized today, when I was disturbed, people, places, and things were the cause of that disturbance. Today, when I'm disturbed, I know I'm the problem, and I have to change that disturbance. We take an inventory. So that's the difference about this positivity of everything. Once you see that, in terms of things, it's immediately positive. That's the way I feel about it. So having the opportunity to meet God through the 11-step meditation every morning, that's the only thing that makes my heart bloom again, makes my heart grow. It is what fills what's lacking in me, allows me to face the biggest dramas of my life. I haven't found any other place in the world that faithfully recalls me to this. This is what encouraged me to let God in, to bring my heart back to life that wasn't talked about. There was something miraculous that happened in that man's heart that he's seen and couldn't quite comprehend. So that's an amazing thing, you know. When I came to doing therapy at around 3 years sober, when I came across step 8, when I started making amends, I started to understand then how my behaviour, how my actions affected others. Because before, the defence mechanisms, the denial, you minimised all your behaviours and all the impact of your behaviours in your drinking days and before your drinking days, and what gets you into the process of what you got yourself into. And then I realised, you know, by each of those amends, I finally realised that I understood what A really was saying to me from the very beginning. And an older member said to me, "Rory, you're the problem, you have to change." And I only started to realise that when I came to step 8. So it took me 3 years, nearly 3 years, to realise what that statement meant. They hit me. So the pride can fall off me and actually accept that for what it meant. and then having to make amends to people in my life, you know. Um, so the whole aspect of this surrender, why is it needed? Well, it's not that I'm not a big book thumper or junkie. I'm not of that nature. That's not my nature. But I'm a keen reader of recovery. I like to get as much recovery inside myself as possible. So it talks about control 25 times in the big book. It mentions it 4 times in the 12 by 12. So it's a disease of control. This heartbreaking obsession talks about, this yearning, this some new miracle of control is going to come back into my life again. The control God is not going to happen, because God helps me to see that it ain't going to be possible. Even with God in my life, that's not possible. So my soul sickness manifested as alcoholism and the other effects that came along with it. So and then comes of age, Harry Tibet, one of the psychiatrists, talked about surrender. And I talked about that's where the ego returns. The unconquerable ego can return again. So that's why I gotta stay humble. That's why when I'm praying, I don't pray. When I'm praying, I always pray that I maintain my prayer life, that I maintain meditation. That's them are graces that I ask for, that I keep up these practices. Because I'm not itself, the fruits will result by steady practice and that discipline. So I'm not asking for massive change. I'm asking that I stay with the disciplines that I found in AA, because it talks about that we're all disciplined people and we let God discipline us in the way we've outlined. So I find that it's that simple. We have to keep going back to it. They read it, they say, no, it actually is. It's giving me a clear cut direction how I can recover one day at a time. So, and the powerful thing about the surrender process is that the step 10 talks about it helps us grow in understanding and effectiveness. So instead of me going with my old ways, the old ideas, which is the control, it can help me understand, here's my defect and here's what I can do with it. I can surrender it to a higher power. So when I go into work and I get the phone calls and the disturbances start to emerge before it even reaches 10 o'clock, I'm only an hour in work, I can suddenly realize, you know what, I can tap into this power resource, the 12-step programs. I can tap on that anytime because it's built inside me. I can ask God, I can do a first step, I can do a 7-step prayer, and I can allow God to take over. And then that anger, which is a blameless anger, I don't know who to blame the anger on, that anger can start to dissipate because I'm meeting it with a power of surrender, which is absolutely powerful. So before I finish the next 5 minutes, I suppose the primary surrender for me, I had to look up what my most glaring defect was, Justin. And I've seen it in one of your talks. It was a lady, I forget her name now, it was a powerful talk. She talked about codependency. And she felt that dependence was the root cause of all our problems. And I can certainly vouch for that in my own experience, because I wasn't taught about it in the 12 by 12. Our demands for emotional security, for our own way, have constantly thrown us into unworkable relationships with other people. And that's what I need to see. And then he goes on further. And says, this craving for such dependence upon people, situations, can only lead to conflict, both on the surface and at depth. So, for me, when I see that, and I can take inventory on it, and I can realize, God, that my life, in a sense, I come to realize on the last night of my drinking, there's nothing left to depend on. I have to depend on something else. And that's when God entered the picture. Now, I wasn't thinking like that on my last night of drinking, but God had helped me see that gradually. It was a spiritual awakening. It was an awakening to what had happened, the fact in my life. And what I ever see today from this primary surrender, this change in my personality, my psyche, a change in my emotional, moral character, and the spiritual dimensions of my life, that I've been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being, as it talks about in 12 by 12. So when I surrender this awakening, this reality that Wilson speaks about, I'm catapulted into this fourth dimension of existence. And that only comes about, Justin, because there was a gift I have received which I didn't have before AA, and that was compassion for other human beings and compassion for myself, and more empathy as a result of going through this process. And really, it's when I am today, when I sit down and I take inventory, I realize, the same things that usually dominate my life 5, 10, 15 years ago in recovery is no longer dominate me. The point I'm at my recovery day, I haven't arrived. I'm at the finished article, but certainly I'm on more emotional balance today than I've ever been in my whole life. And that is the free gift that it talks about. That's a free gift. The fact that I can say I'm emotionally in balance today. I'm not cheating on my wife. I have a good relationship with my wife. I'm willing to go through whatever I have to go through to maintain my relationship with her. These are things, these are gifts I didn't have pre-recovery. I couldn't have a relationship in another human being. It wasn't possible. And last week's speaker talked about insecure attachment. And I had that my whole life. I never had a secure attachment. And only in doing the first step was I able to get that attachment. So that healing power surely cannot flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken and broken at death. And it's only then that we start to transform, we start to accept, this is what has happened here it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. What recovery can do for the individual is absolutely mind blowing if they be willing. So I have my spiritual friends. One of my spiritual friends is Paul Wilson. I continuously read his literature. Our spiritual friends exist in our fellowship as well. Justin, your podcast now has become part of that spiritual friendship that I'm open to. My spirit's opened it, So today, this transformative surrender is possible. It is possible for someone like me. So it's possible for someone else out there also who, like me, was in that state of nihilism, that there's nothing there. There's nothing to grow towards. And I think that surrender helps change that nothingness and that deeply meaningful life, that my life was worth living today because of this principle of surrender that I found in the AA. And that's all I'll share, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rory. I really appreciate it. And, I had to put my Irish listening ears on there and I got some really good stuff out of it. I really appreciate it. Some of the things that, I love the miracle that you expressed happen, the grace, the gifts that God gives at the end. I mean, some of those things that you shared, that's just a miracle. And I love hearing those and experiencing those in my own life. All right. So let's see. Before we get onto our Q&A, I just want to remind our live listening audience, if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom, and I'll read those as they come up. Now, Rory, before we get to those, would you mind just sharing for about 60 seconds about AA and how that helps you? We're not marketing for AA, but how does that help you so that somebody else who may be walking that path may go, that might be something I want to look into?
Well, it helps me because it's you'll find that it's the language of the heart. You'll see all the things that the individuals run away from. If you don't sit and visit in AA, you're never going to visit. So it talks about defective relations is the cause of all our woes, including alcoholism. So the sooner that you find out you're the problem when you're sitting in an AA meeting, the sooner the solution can arrive for you, the sooner you ask for help. And the biggest trouble today is people reaching out to ours, because there's an array of social media there there's a lot of options there that wasn't there when I came on. There's a lot of other different helps out there, but for me, what I found in AA was just sitting down, one alcoholic, chatting an hour. Something happened. The miracle into my life, and the pride and the fear fell away once I started reaching out to other people. And that can be a hard beginning, but it ends up as a very fruitful reward once you do be willing to ask for help. And AA is a perfect model for someone like me.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Rory. One of the things you brought up was nihilism. You had experienced in your life, and at a very young age, this thought of there's nothing that matters, nihilism. Do you remember kind of how that thought process, that belief process of, there's nothing more that matters, life is nothing. How did that change? Is there like a specific event that happened that made you go, wow, there is more to life than just, what I've been doing and believing?
I think when I can no longer, what the sense was when I can no longer use chemicals of any kind to deal with my emotional disturbances. that's when I realized that there's meaning to suffering. The suffering is redemptive rather than destructive. And that's when I think that's come about through repeated experience. Oh, you're going to get tough times in recovery. That's almost like the tries and low spots are there for everybody. But when you don't use or substitute or use some sort of distraction, I think when you sit down and like for me at 13 years sober, Justin, I started doing silent meditation, and that was to counteract that nihilism because that sense of nihilism could still creep back in, where even though I've got my recovery's okay, I'm doing okay, I'm active in AA, but there was still like that sense of nihilism sometimes was still there. It's like a fog would appear in my head, and there was no light. It was just like a dark fog, a dense fog with no light at the end of the tunnel. And I felt well, the meditation helped me deal with going through that process. It's almost like a dark night of the soul almost. So it was meditation that helped me transcend that nihilism.
Is that your step 11 meditation process that you do every day? Is that what that is, or is that in addition to that?
Yeah, that'll be 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And I have a wee book that I'd use along with Silence and Stillness in every season. So it gives you a wee reading every day about meditation and how essential it is. You know, so it's step 11. The fruits of meditation obviously is emotional balance. So
and as you meditate like that in 20 minutes every morning, 20 minutes every evening, what does that conscious contact with God or with a higher power feel like? Or how do you experience that in those moments?
I suppose I'm amazed at how solid and formidable, not psychological, how solid and formidable his presence is because we've all got this deep need in our heart. And what we do in society today is that we go on social media, we do different distractions. We let on that need's not there. And I think that they bring that need. It's only in the silence that I find what I need. So I'm made for silence because in silence is where I find God. And that's the only thing that can know God. So I'm part of that silence. So that's where that's a creative thing.
Very good. Thank you. And then you also brought up, the resentments that come up in life.
Mm-hmm.
And surrender is such a massive part of that. I mean, there are times when I feel like I have been absolutely wronged and there's no fault of mine, but that resentment will get me drunk, will kill me just as fast as a resentment that is mostly my fault. So how do you go about surrendering those resentments in your everyday life?
It's a very good question because I think I'm going to bring it back to there's a snake. There's a snake in every human being, Justin. There's a snake in me also. It's only a matter of time before it strikes. So what I got to understand the process of it is I got to separate the principle from the person. So it's like separating the disease from the person. It's two different aspects, two different things almost. So I got to understand. Well, if I'm disturbed or if I feel wronged, you know, the surrender process talks about in step 10, restraint of tongue and self-restraint. So your self-restraint is the actual result of the surrender. So if I don't, alcoholics, it talks about now and on, alcoholics act and people around them react. So sometimes when you're sitting in a meeting and someone's maybe behaving in a way that's not conducive to recovery, that's not really positive for recovery. But if I can turn it on its head and realize, what I have to do in my own mind is I have to go back to talk about the freedom from bondage, the freedom from bondage chapter in the AA Big Book. And I had to do it many, many times throughout the years. I had to wish that individual peace, happiness, and prosperity, even when my emotional state is not there yet. But I continuously want to do that. And I also have my own personal prayer life. I have a thing called the Surrender Novena. So, and it's surrendering everything to God throughout the day. And the novena helps me, it helps me calm those stormy emotions that can arise, because I know for me that I say I'm in recovery because I know when resentment's in my head, I'm almost insane sometimes. I just can't, the thing that I'm thinking about, the person I'm thinking about, is centered in my mind and I can't seem to shift it on and off myself. But every time I keep relying on these principles, it has less of a sting than it did years ago. I'm not holding on to this. I'm not affected by resentments just in the same way I was 15 years ago or 10 years ago because I'm getting better in myself. So I'm not as dependent on other people for approval or a sense of security.
Awesome. Thank you, Rory. You know, as I battled myself for decades before I finally decided to step into one of these rooms of recovery, one of the things that I did not want to admit in that process was powerlessness or surrender. I thought that those words were the weakest and most sniveling words in the English language.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as I've been working my recovery, I find powerlessness and surrender two of the most powerful words in the English language.
Mm-hmm.
Do you identify with that? And if so, how did that switch happen in your mind from a terrible word in vocabulary to a powerful word in vocabulary?
Where I got the sense of that, just in terms of my own awakening to that, was I found in my early days of recovery because I was spending more and more time by myself when I wasn't at meetings. So I think the more time that you spend with yourself, I think the more it talks about in the book, God will feels more to us as time goes on. And I think that God has a way of, I think he's a way of melting our hard hearts because our hearts can be hard and receptive. Not receptive, but they can't. I know for myself, my heart can be very hard sometimes. Because I'm where I'm thinking about this is that the powers and the surrender, how it becomes so vital to me today is because I found in the early days I was on my knees more praying. And as I get longer sober, I find that I lie in bed more praying. So what I've done the other night consciously on Wednesday night is I got my knees for about a half an hour and I started praying. I was praying my prayers. And I felt afterwards I was actually right size at that moment. I was at the right size because it talks about in the 7th step, humility, that vital ingredient. We need much more of it. And the 12 steps is built, not humility. And I had an odd acquaintance with, like most people in addictions, I had an odd acquaintance with. And also it's about that opening up my heart, my mind to that power of that principle once you start truly practicing it. If your life depends on it, you will eventually come to accept it and practice it.
Very good. All right. A reminder to our live audience, if you have any questions for Rory, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom. I have another question here for you that you brought up, and then one more that I have so far. We'll see if any others trigger in or trickle in. You just mentioned right-sized. I love that phrase, and it's a fairly new phrase in my mind, what that means. Describe to me what being right-sized in life and before God means to you.
I can only take a sense of what I know. It's not. I know I'm going to quote something here. It's not a literature, but it's something that I can fully identify with. When St. Paul talks about it's not I that lives, but Christ that now lives on me. So that self that we talk about that runs the show, that wants to run other people's lives, that wants everything its own way. That self no longer loves the way it did before. And there's a sense of God's spirit entering the fray now. So what I'm saying is that when I get right size is when I take that time to set my ego aside for the meditation. Why am I sitting here for 20 minutes in silence and I'm getting absolutely nothing out of this? Well, I was never supposed to get anything out of it. I was meant to discipline myself to the spiritual practice. It wasn't about getting a spiritual high. It was becoming right-sized. So God has a place for everybody in the Word and the right place. So it's important to know your position in life. So for me today, so we talked about God's a father, we are his children. He's the business person, the manager, and we're his agents. So it's about getting down the right size. Without that power given myself, I couldn't even begin to understand what this conversation's about. It would be foreign language to me. So right size is about acceptance of yourself, obviously, and acceptance of your circumstances, and acceptance of who's close by to you as well, which is an ongoing process. It's not something that magically happens on and of itself. So
I love that concept that you said, hey, if I'm sitting here for 20 minutes in meditation and I'm not getting anything out of it, I'm not entitled to get anything out of it. And that's amazing. Sometimes when I'm doing my own, morning step 11 work and trying to make conscious contact with God and there's nothing coming, sometimes I get frustrated. But you sharing that right now just really helped me accept those times and just be grateful for the silence and the becoming right-sized. Sometimes that message is sit in silence, relax, know that I'm God. I've got you, and I think that'll help me a lot in teaching or sharing my experience of conscious contact with God with others when they express frustration. I'm getting nothing, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned an episode of the RICO 12 podcast and I believe it was the episode with Nikki M, who spoke about codependency in the Big Book. Yeah, that was a great episode. And that was, I really appreciate that, that reminder of that episode. I need to go back and listen to it again because it wasn't a life-changing episode. So to our listening audience, if you have not heard the episode with Nikki M, I believe that was sometime around episode number 10, give or take a few episodes, but really, really good on codependency and how the Big Book and the steps of recovery work together in that. All right. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us before we close this up and move into a prayer, Rory?
I suppose the one thing I would say is keep practicing being grateful for what you have. Keep being grateful because you can't. It wasn't taught about in the Big Book. We think we've struck gold, but it's a limitless load. It's an infinite thing that we've actually discovered. So I think my only response is gratefulness that I've actually even become aware, even become conscious of the fact of what I've received gradually over the years. It's been the more awakened that I'm becoming regarding what I've received, the more grateful that I actually am. I'm actually here talking about it with someone else. It makes me so grateful. The joy of loving we really have, even under pressure and difficulty, it talks about in the Big Book. And it is a joy to be sitting here sharing.
Awesome. And I am grateful that you are sitting here sharing with us, Rory. Thank you for taking the time there. Thanks again. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If you have any additional questions or have any discussion items, you can go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you have not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address, you only need to do that once. Please get on the invitation list so you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. We are now looking to fill guest speakers in April and May. So if you are a listener here and think that you would like to be a guest speaker, give it a shot. Reach out to me through the website and we'll get it lined up. Next week, we will be hearing from Thomas, and it is going to be a great conversation about a new way of life in recovery. Anyways, before we close up, Rory has asked that we close out this meeting and launch into the rest of the day with one of his favorite meditation prayers. Rory, go ahead and lead us with that.
Heavenly Father, open our heart to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. It is in that mysterious silence where love is revealed to all who call, Maranatha, Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus, come.
Thank you. And I love Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus. Keep coming back, everybody. It works if you work it. So work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of